Kevin Nelson. Here's a look at what's going on this week in the news. We begin with news from around the country. The Conscience Protection Act of 2017 has the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops' support, and the conference, along with 32 other organizations, have written a letter to the U.S. senators to express that support. The bill has both Senate and House versions and is intended to close loopholes that ignore the ethical rights of medical professionals on abortion. The letter to senators stated that even many pro-choice Americans realize the reasoning of pro-lifer supporters requires them to respect a choice not to be involved in abortion. And yet, with the violations of federal conscience laws occurring in many states, most recently in Oregon, it's clear that the current laws offer less protection in practice than in theory. The House passed an identical bill last year with a vote of 245 to 182. In news from around the world, Pope Francis, in his first address in Colombia, called on Colombians to put aside prejudice and pursue peace through social inclusion, fighting inequality, and paying attention to the plight of the country's most marginalized populations. The Pope spoke along with the Colombian president outside the presidential palace. Rome Reports has more from Colombia.
The president and his wife welcomed Pope Francis once again, this time in the plaza of the Nariño House, while the singer Fonseca performed a hymn of his song, Puede Ser. Before his speech, some moving images were seen, like the one of this kneeling man asking for the Pope's blessing, or of one of the sick people he blessed along the way. The Colombian president welcomed the Pope with these words.
Confiamos en que su visita abra el corazón y las mentes de los colombianos a la paz que viene de Dios y habita en el alma de los hombres. A esa paz que ahora estamos construyendo. Bienvenido a Colombia, Su Santidad.
During his first intervention with Colombia, the Pope was direct. He recalled the words of his first apostolic exhortation, Evangelii Gaudium. He particularly noted the part in which he says that the more difficult the path to peace is, the more effort that must be put into appreciating one another.
Y quise venir hasta aquí para decirles que no están solos, que somos muchos los que queremos acompañarlos en este paso. Que este esfuerzo nos haga huir de toda tentación de venganza y búsqueda de intereses solo particulares y a corto plazo.
After the encounter, President Santos and the Pope entered the palace as chiefs of state to meet in private as the protocol orders.
Pope Francis arrived in Colombia as the country pursues peace after 5 decades of armed conflict. The conflict has claimed 220,000 lives and left millions more victimized and displaced. Many of these victims came from the poorest levels of Colombian society. Pope Francis also met with the bishops of the country during his visit, bringing them a message of peace, forgiveness, and encouragement as they work to help rebuild their country.
While the atmosphere of the Pope's encounter with the young people was lively, Pope Francis switched things up for his meeting with the bishops. He addressed them with a long, deep speech about the actions they must maintain during the historical period the country is currently experiencing. He told them they are not politicians, but pastors, which is why they must speak out against injustice with liberty.
No sirven alianzas con una parte u otra, sino la libertad de hablar a los corazones de todos. No tengan miedo de alzar serenamente la voz para recordar a todos que una sociedad que se deja seducir por el espejismo del narcotráfico se arrastra a sí misma en esa metástasis moral que mercantiliza el infierno y siembra por doquier la corrupción y al mismo tiempo engorda los paraísos fiscales.
He told them that prayer must be a key part of their lives, that they should converse amongst themselves, and that they should look at the present with the eyes of the future.
The Pope's 5-day visit also includes Mass focused on young people, praying with victims of violence, an address to clergy and religious, a visit to an orphanage, an address on the Church's controversial role in the slave trade, and the recitation of the Angelus at a shrine in St. Peter Claver. More news from around the country now. During a recent ceremony at the University of Notre Dame, a postage stamp was issued honoring former President Holy Cross Father Theodore Hesburgh. Father Hesburgh, who died in February of 2015 at the age of 97, was president of the university from 1952 to 1987. The hour-long event featured several speakers, including Condoleezza Rice, former Secretary of State and a 1975 Notre Dame graduate, Postmaster General Megan Brennan, and current university president Holy Cross Father John Jenkins. The stamp honors Father Hesburgh for his role as an educator and his service as an advisor on many social issues to presidents from Dwight Eisenhower to George W. Bush. The stamp is based on a 1980 photograph of the priest on campus with the school's iconic golden dome in the background. And finally in the news, according to reports, the resignation of Pope Benedict XVI and subsequent election of Pope Francis will be the subject of a new film set to debut on Netflix. The film is expected to star Jonathan Pryce as Pope Francis and Anthony Hopkins as Pope Benedict XVI. Titled The Pope, the movie will depict events beginning with Pope Benedict's election and resignation, which led to the election of Cardinal Jorge Mario Bergoglio as the Catholic Church's first non-European pope in almost 1,300 years. Pryce recently portrayed the character of the High Sparrow on HBO's Game of Thrones and has drawn comparisons to Pope Francis as they share similar facial attributes. Production on The Pope is scheduled to begin in November. And that is all the information we have for you at this time. I'm Kevin Elson. Don't forget, you can keep up to date on Catholic news throughout the week with Catholic Newsbreak right here on the Catholic TV network.